Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we have a collection of unbelievable stories for you, and we'll get to that after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Welcome back to the show. Well, we're going to talk about revenue collection. We're going to talk about what did a Republican candidate for the governorship of this state do. You're going to find this interesting. Plus, who now conceivably could run against Senator Casey, who's up for re-election next year. We got a collection of big stories. Joining me to explain all of that and to get the facts out, Angela Couloumbis, she's with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Marc Levy, he's with the Associated Press. And sitting next to me is Katie Meyer. She's the Capitol Bureau Chief for, I always say, public radio. Is that okay with you, ITF?
It is public radio.
It is Pennsylvania Public Radio, but we'll get to those okay. All right, Mark, all of you have been involved in stories involving revenue collections. They are down, remarkably down for this state, and that has big implications for the budget. Talk about that.
Yeah, so it's a really ugly budget year for the state. It's probably the ugliest since the recession. April was a huge tax collection month for the state, and they were way behind. They were $500-some-odd million below expectations. Now, some of that will be recouped in May, but the bottom line is that it's a bad year. They're going to have to have a very austere budget unless there's a massive tax increase. With a Republican-controlled legislature, that's unlikely. They're going to look to other sources of money like gambling and selling, more liquor to try to make up for the shortfall, but the bottom line is it's ugly, and that's bad news for counties, that's bad news for school districts, and that's probably bad news for your property tax bill.
Yeah, now, Katie, Mark brings up an interesting point here. The Republicans, many of them elected on a no tax hike pledge. You interview them all the time. No tax hike pledge. Does it mean additional cuts to a very austere budget that Governor Wolf recommended, 1.8% increase? It looks like that just this year's debt, or I should say deficit in this year's budget could push $800-900 million, and I'm not even talking about the structural deficit.
Yeah, well, the Department of Revenue, just for this year, the shortfall's around $1 billion now. That's like the current projection based on the latest numbers, and so that is up from what they were projecting before. And you're right. I think, you want to get a sense of where the legislature is, where the Republicans are. You can look at the GOP, the House GOP's proposed budget, where there were just across the board cuts, and it really is. We talk about with Governor Tom Wolf, he talked about targeted cuts, combining the Department of, Corrections and, combining the 4 large health departments, those things. But really, when you look at the GOP budget, because they're balancing it primarily on large cuts, it's across the board. It's everywhere.
Now, go ahead,
And Mark mentioned liquor. There seems to be a bit of a divide between the House and the Senate as to how realistic any more liquor reform is going to be as a way to balance the budget. It was Senator Corman just a few weeks back who said that he doesn't think that the Senate would back any major change to the state's liquor structure as a way to raise revenue. So that leaves them in a bit of a lurch. Online gambling was mentioned as a potential revenue source. That seems to be, there seem to be very hot and heavy negotiations on that as we speak. There also seem to be sort of more quiet negotiations on a perennial issue, which is pension reform as well, as part of the budget negotiations.
Yeah, but any way you look at it, it's just, I'll go back to you, Katie, and then we'll turn to Mark. The fact is, it's hard for me to believe that the Republicans, not arguably, and I'm not stating this as a criticism, just descriptively, most conservative legislature in modern history. Many of these Republicans elected on a pledge, we're not going to raise taxes, we're going to cut. And so here's Governor Wolf, who really does want income and sales taxes, but he didn't propose it. It was an election year budget. He proposed it in his first 2. How about the shale tax?
Well.
Marcellus Shale, right? He tried that too.
Right. You mentioned that, we got the largest Republican majority since the Eisenhower administration. You ask Republican leadership, what about a Marcellus Shale tax? they pretty much say no. They say no point blank. They don't want it. Their constituents don't really want it. And it would, bring in a significant amount of revenue, but they think they can do without.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to another subject. I don't know which one of you. I'm going to let one of you put your hands up. This is fascinating. State Senator Scott Wagner, who's a candidate for governor, had an event at the York Country Club, and it turned into, well, let me just say this, maybe a wonderful event for his prospective opponents because of what happened. Who wants to try this on? Angela, you're smiling. I'll let you try this one on.
Yeah, so it became a confrontation between Senator Wagner and what we all call his campaign tracker. Basically, it's the person who works for the opposition, who shadows him around as he campaigns across the state.
Right.
Usually to catch him in some sort of saying something embarrassing or controversial that they can then use against him.
Exactly.
So Senator Wagner noticed this tracker in the audience and got very upset and accused him of trespassing and went up to him and basically confiscated his video equipment. And depending on who you believe, the tracker says he also took the memory card out and never returned it. And then the tracker followed him around the country club and with his now cell phone camera.
Oh, gee.
And Senator Wagner got upset and pushed the camera away and left the tracker complaining of a bloody finger.
A bloody finger, yeah. We're going to run to a break. I want to continue this because we're going to see this. There could be political implications of this and what do trackers do. And we're not tracking anybody on this program, but we'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Angela Couloumbis, Marc Levy, and Katie Meyer join me. We're chatting about the big stories of the week, I could put it that way. And now we've got this situation with State Senator Scott Wagner. He's also a candidate for governor. He wants to win the Republican primary. He had this event at the York Country Club where there was a tracker. Mark, you've covered politics for a good many years. This is commonplace, these trackers. Am I right or wrong? They go everywhere. They follow you.
You are right. At least for the past 15 years, as long as I've been covering campaigns in Pennsylvania, there have been trackers. There was one on Ed Rendell when he first ran for governor in 2002. And
he would like that. He would probably ask the guy to sit down and have lunch with him, wouldn't he?
Candidates have different ways of handling it. Some are confrontational, some avoid it. Others just kind of adopt them as part of the traveling circus that a campaign can become. And they know them by name. They offer them food. They offer them drink. They offer them transportation. So you really get a sense of a candidate's personality and how they're willing to treat somebody doing the bidding of the opposition.
Now, what's fascinating about this, he might argue, I'm talking about Senator Wagner, if this was a private country club, this was a private event, didn't he ask the tracker how
he got in? Yes, so this is just based, again, I haven't spoken to either one of them, but based on the video, the tracker did say that I just walked in the front door, and he says on the video that Senator Wagner said hi to him as he walked in, and it wasn't an issue.
He probably didn't know.
He didn't, I don't think he knew that it was,
there.
right, and I don't think he knew that he was a tracker when he first came in, but it became obviously an issue.
Yeah. Well, the one thing we know, Angela, is we're going to see this video again, aren't we?
I think so, and I think that there is a certain type of voter who will find it appealing and other types of voters who will find it appalling. I mean, this is a candidate who has drawn comparisons to President Trump in terms of his personality and his style. So, look, that could be end up working in his favor. You never know.
Yeah. Well, now this brings up another subject, and I'll just go around here. Mark, that the Republican primary for governor is getting another candidate, a very wealthy Pittsburgh guy. I'll let you to talk about him if you will. So you don't know. It's just might just not be Governor Wolf who uses it, but his Republican primary opponents. And now we're getting a guy named Paul Mango. You want to tell us a little bit about him and why he could be formidable?
Right, and it's not just Paul Mango. Mike Turzai, the House Speaker, a Republican from suburban Pittsburgh, is telling Republicans that he is seriously considering running and very close to making the decision on that.
Speaker of the House, right? Speaker
of the House. So Paul Mango has not done a single media interview. So where he stands on any issue is a complete mystery. He's a guy that no one in the Capitol had really heard of more than a couple months ago. He's a longtime healthcare systems consultant for McKinsey Worldwide. It's a worldwide consultancy on management systems. So he's perceived to be a guy who could help self-fund a campaign.
Where have we heard that before?
You have Scott Wagner, who's
and Governor Wolf, right?
And Governor Wolf. Scott Wagner's put $4 million into his campaign so far. Tom Wolf put $10 million into his campaign in 2014. So, we don't know a lot about Paul Mango. We don't know whether he's going to be the moderate option, whether he'll be the candidate of the business class, whether he will be the candidate of sort of the Scott Wagner target audience, which is sort of the Donald Trump's target audience.
And we don't even know if he's going to do, I presume he's going to do a tour, and obviously he can stop by, do the public radio thing. You'll be glad to interview him, right?
I will be if he comes by,
Yeah, of course. So, the Republican primary now looks like it could get competitive.
Certainly could. And obviously it was early. Scott Wagner did get in very early. So the fact that he's been sort of the de facto opponent candidate for a while, I think that has raised his profile, certainly, but we're going to see the field start to get much more crowded.
Yeah. And he's in a position, obviously, to make headlines aside from his confrontations with trackers. He is a state senator. He is in the Capitol. Same thing with Mike Turzai. They're both, people who get written about quite a bit and get a lot of press, as opposed to Paul Mango, who, like Mark said, is a virtual unknown in political circles. But, I guess one of the things that never comes up in these things is that, and I think Governor Wolf discovered it too, is that you don't just come in as governor and by fiat say, this is how I'm going to do things. You're dealing with a legislature
you
that
think Donald Trump has found that out too?
I
President
think,
Trump.
And that's what kind of interests me when I look at the field and I see all of these people who built their resumes in the private sector where things work quite differently.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, let's run to a break. When we come back, Senator Casey conceivably could draw a serious opponent as he attempts to win a third term in the United States Senate. We'll take that up and debate whether or not a certain congressman, will get into all of that, might run against Senator Casey. We'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Welcome back to the program. Well, Marc Levy, Associated Press, let's start with you. It looks like Senator Casey, this isn't for sure, this is still in doubt. Senator Casey could draw a pretty significant opponent. Who's the opponent and why has he been nudged by somebody to get into this race? Take it.
Yeah, so we're talking about U.S. Representative Lou Barletta, who represents the 11th District. It stretches from south central Pennsylvania, Cumberland County area, all the way up to northeastern Pennsylvania, where it was basically located in the last decade, but it was stretched down here.
I wonder why.
to get more Republicans into it.
That's exactly right.
And to make it more conservative, more safe for him. Now, the Trump people are urging Lou Barletta to run. Lou Barletta endorsed Donald Trump
early
in the primary. It was March of last year, before the primary election happened here in Pennsylvania. Lou Barletta's district went heavily for Trump. And Lou Barletta ended up serving on Donald Trump's transition team. So the Trump people want Lou Barletta to run. Lou Barletta was catapulted into office after he was the Hazleton mayor and pursued a platform of measures targeting illegal immigrants in his city.
He did that when he was mayor of Hazleton.
Right, and these were concepts like denying a permit to a business that hired illegal immigrants, and preventing them from renting in the city. And so these measures went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and were struck down in 2014. But lots of other cities across the United States copied them. They're now unconstitutional.
Right.
But Lou Barletta gained a lot of national attention for that, and he's maintained a very firm stance on targeting illegal immigration.
And a pretty high profile. Would you all agree with that? I think
relatively.
Yeah. And the other point I would make is that there are two state House members. Am I right? Yeah, Rick Saccone and Jim Christiana, both. And there's somebody else, I think, whose name eludes me at the moment.
There's a businessman from southeastern Pennsylvania named Jeff Bartos who's gotten into the race.
So this could get pretty crowded.
It could, and I still think Senator Casey's going to be very difficult to beat. He's got tremendous name recognition. He does have crossover appeal as well with certain Republicans. So it is going to be definitely a costly and ugly, drawn-out race.
Yeah, the other aspect, just to pick up on that, we're not ending the election. We're just stating the obvious. Most of the analysts in Washington have called this a likely Democratic seat. We're just stating it, but Casey has blue-collar roots. I just think he's going to be tough to beat. We'll have to wait and see. Nobody, who knows what will happen in terms of the national issues and how that will all play out. Go ahead.
It does speak volumes, though, that we do not have a higher profile Republican getting into the race to challenge Bob Casey.
Unless Barletta runs.
Unless Barletta runs,
Right.
but he's not running yet. He has not gotten into the race, and part of the reason why the Trump people are being public about wanting him to get in may be to try to apply pressure on him to get in. But
Right.
I think if Bob Casey was perceived as vulnerable, you would have much bigger names already in the race.
All right, let's run to a break, and then we'll do the final segment. When we come back, Pennsylvania looks like it's going to have a net loss in population when we go through the next census, meaning we'll lose at least one congressional seat. We'll go from 18 to 17. In the past decades, we have gained population minimally. Other states, particularly in the South and the Southwest, have picked up population. That's why we lose seats. But now, as Katie's going to get into, we're going to lose seats among the people I hang around with. They're called the millennials, the 18 to 34-year-olds on a college campus. We'll take that up with Katie and the rest of the panel in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives.
Well, it now looks like that we will lose a seat in our congressional delegation as a result of the census that gets done, and it all gets reported by certainly 2021 when that decision has to be made. And one of the reasons Katie Meyer is going to tell us about why our population is in absolute terms declining. Take it away.
Yes. So one of the factors here is, well, first of all, we had an overall population contraction based on the most recent available census data, which is from 2015. The IFO, included a lot of this in their most recent economic report, and they also did a separate report on the numbers of young people leaving the state. And so now, every year, obviously, and this is again 2015. You have people coming in, you have people going, and in terms of the millennial generation, I think it is between 18 and 34. We saw these people, we saw a net loss. And so that could be down to many factors. It could be, I think you mentioned before when we were talking, people going home after college to different states. You see like a Penn State grad going back to a different state and staying there. You also could have other factors, like, for instance, there's a big trend now with millennials grouping in large cities and on the coasts.
Good point.
Fewer of them stay in the middle of America, and Pennsylvania, obviously, not really a coastal state. So there's a lot of factors here, but what it boils down to is, we have a contracting population overall. We just saw in the latest IFO report that they were predicting a small increase in population, which we have, every year you can sort of bank on that, but that didn't happen.
I think this year, the reports that I saw earlier were that we were going to lose people in absolute terms.
Oh yeah, no, the population contracted.
Terms, not up, but less so than other states.
Sure, and that does have connotations both for the economy. Obviously, fewer people in the state means fewer people spending money in the state, working in the state. And it also means that we could, lose some political power when we get reapportioned in 2021.
In 1930, Pennsylvania had 36 members of Congress. Now we're we're at 18, heading to 17.
And that's a trend, though, all over the East Coast,
right? You're right. Yeah, in the Northeast in particular.
Yeah.
You're right. Good. Anybody on that, or we wanted to
Yeah, I think there's a good point to be made, though, that Pennsylvania has one of the highest median ages in the nation, and if we're losing younger people and the workforce is shrinking, and we have more people who are old and it's costlier to take care of them, that has serious implications for the state budget and your tax dollars.
And young people, as we always say, are the future. I often say these 70 millennials, largest age cohort in our country, 70 million of them in 10 to 15 years, they're going to run America, probably both in terms of business and in terms of politics. Speaking of a little bit of politics, Angela, we got a minute left, that's all. What's going to happen between now and the big day, budget time?
I think we'll see something this year, legalizing online gambling, and I mean, this is a bold prediction because they have been unable to do it in the last year and a half, but there will likely be a component in that legislation that will address the whole local share fix issue, and so in terms of a revenue generator that there could be a meeting of the minds on, I think that is one of them. The more social issue bills that tend to create a lot of controversy, I don't see that happening. All
right, we'll get you back, and we got a lot more to play out in the budget cycle. It's going to be, could be more controversial than we thought. All right, we'll see you next year. We'll see you, try next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.